Blessed love and peace. This is recitation of Tobari Gokadao, Torah Bhagavad Gita, Diganakaya, the Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, and Tao Te Ching. Portion this week is 26, Shemini, which includes from Torah, Parsha Shemini, which is Vaikra 9:1 a 11:47. From the Chandogya Upanishad, it is Kanda 3, numero 19. From the Bhagavad Gita, it is the Akshara Brahma Yogahe numero 8. From Tao Te Ching, it is chapter 26. From Ming Ke, it is chapter 6 of 28. From the Digna-nikaya, it is the Mahaparinibbana Sutta 16:5. From the Dhammapada, it is the Brahmana Vaga 26. From the Gospels, it is Luke chapter 7-8. From the Quran, it is Surah Qasas, numero 28. And from the Kitabi Aqdas, it is verse 96 a 114. Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. Allahu Akbar. Dao ke dao fe chong dao, ming ke ming fe chong ming. Ja Rastafari. Deus noster qui es in cieli, sanctificato nomen tuum. Vaheguru Satnam. Baruch atah Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam, asher quitzanu bo mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok b'davar Torah. Amen. Kyrie eleison. Sivomastu save jagatahi, sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. Fagabiyam. Aquaba upendo na amani. Fikiri inesalami. Chintadam peramian. Liabovamian. Womanjaka. Ubuntu shabona fakithka. Shishem. Kama sunida. Domo arigato. Pilama yelo wakatoko. Toko dokashin good. Governor God. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata jam yat yata afanami. Ado. Aho. Om shanti shanti shanti. Amen. Torah Shemini. And it was on the 8th day that Moshe summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said, Aaron, take for yourself a bull calf as a sin offering and a ram as a burnt offering, both unblemished, and bring them near before Elohim. And to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, take a he-goat up as a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both in their first year, and both unblemished, as a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram as peace offerings to slaughter before Elohim, and a meal offering mixed with oil, for today Elohim is appearing to you. And they took what Moshe had commanded to the front of the tent of meeting, and the entire community approached and stood before Elohim. And Moshe said, this is the thing Elohim has commanded. Do it, and the glory of Elohim will appear to you. And Moshe said to Aaron, approach the altar and perform your sin offering and your burnt offering, atoning for yourself and for the people, and perform the people's offering, atoning for them as Elohim has commanded. So Moshe approached the altar and slaughtered his sin offering calf. And Aaron's sons brought forth the blood to him, and he dipped his finger into the blood, placing some on the horns of the altar, and he poured the blood at the base of the altar. And the fat, the kidneys, and the diaphragm with the liver from the sin offering he caused to go up in smoke on the altar, as Elohim had commanded Moshe. And he burned the flesh and the hide in fire outside the camp. And he slaughtered the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they presented the burnt offering to him in its prescribed portions, along with the head. And he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar. And he washed the innards and the legs, and he caused them to go up in smoke on the altar, along with the burnt offering. And he brought forth the people's offering. He took the people's sin offering goat, slaughtered it, and made it a sin offering like the first one. And he brought forth the burnt offering and prepared it according to the law. And he brought forward the meal offering, filled his palm with it, and caused it to go up in smoke on the altar, in addition to the matin burnt offering. And he slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's peace offering, and Aaron's sons presented the blood to him, and he dashed it on the altar around. And they also presented the fats from the ox and from the ram, the tail, the fatty covering, the kidneys, and the diaphragm with the liver. And they placed the fats on top of the breasts, and he caused the fats to go up in smoke on the altar. And Aaron had already waved the breast and the right thigh as a wave offering before Elohim, as Moshe had commanded. And Aaron lifted up his hands towards the people and blessed them. He then descended from preparing the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering. And Moshe and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. Then they came out and blessed the people, and the glory of Elohim appeared to all the people. And fire went forth from before Elohim and consumed the burnt offering and the fats upon the altar, and all the people saw, sang praises, and fell upon their faces. And Aaron's sons Nadav and Abihu each took his pan, put fire in them, and placed incense upon it, and they brought before Elohim foreign fire, which Elohim had not commanded them. And fire went forth from before Elohim and consumed them, and they died before Elohim. Then Moshe said to Aaron, "This is what Elohim spoke, when Elohim said, I will be sanctified through those near to me, and before all the people I will be glorified." And Aaron was silent. And Moshe summoned Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Draw near, carry your kinsmen from within the sanctuary to the outside of the camp." So they approached and carried them with their tunics to the outside of the camp, as Moshe had spoken. And Moshe said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Itamar his sons, "Do not leave your heads unshorn, and do not rend your garments, so that you shall not die, and lest Elohim be angry with the entire community, but your brothers, the entire house of Israel, shall bewail the conflagration that Elohim has burned. And do not go out of the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, because Elohim's anointing oil is upon you." And they did according to Moshe's order. And Elohim said to Aaron, saying, "Do not drink wine that will lead to intoxication, neither you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you shall not die. This is an eternal statute for your generations, to distinguish between the holy and profane, and between unclean and clean, and to instruct the children of Israel regarding all the statutes which Elohim has spoken to them through Moshe." And Moshe spoke to Aaron and his surviving sons, Eleazar and Itamar, "Take the meal offering that is left over from Elohim's fire offerings, and eat it as unleavened loaves beside the altar, for it is a holy of holies. You shall eat it in a holy place, because it is your portion and your sons' portion from Elohim's fire offerings, for so I have been commanded. The breast of the waving and the thigh of the raising up you shall eat in a clean place, you and your sons and your daughters with you, for as your portion and your sons' portion they have been given from the peace offerings of the children of Israel. They shall bring the thigh of the raising up and the breast of the waving upon the fats for fire offerings, to wave as a waving before Elohim, and it shall belong to you and to your sons with you as an eternal due, as Elohim has commanded." And Moshe thoroughly investigated concerning the sin offering he-goat, and behold, it had been burnt. So he was angry with Eleazar and Itamar, Aaron's surviving sons, saying, "Why did you not eat the sin offering in the holy place? For it is holy of holies, and Elohim has given it to you to gain forgiveness for the sin of the community, to effect their atonement before Elohim. Behold, its blood was not brought into the sanctuary within, so you should have surely eaten it within holy precincts, as I commanded." And Aaron spoke to Moshe, "But today did they offer up their sin offering and their burnt offering before Elohim? But if tragic events like these had befallen me, and if I had eaten a sin offering today, would it have pleased Elohim?" Moshe heard this, and it pleased him. And Elohim spoke to Moshe and to Aaron to say to them, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the creatures that you may eat amongst all the animals on earth. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is completely split into double hooves, and which brings up its cud, that one you may eat. But these you shall not eat amongst those that bring up the cud, and those that have a cloven hoof. The camel, because it brings up its cud, but does not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the hare ox, because it brings up its cud, but will not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the hare, because it brings up its cud, but does not have a completely cloven hoof, it is unclean for you. And the pig, because it has a cloven hoof that is completely split, but will not regurgitate its cud, it is unclean for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses, they are unclean for you. Amongst all creatures that are in the water you may eat these. Any of the creatures in the water that has fins and scales, those you may eat, whether it lives in the waters, in the seas, or in the rivers. But any creatures that do not have fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, amongst all the creeping creatures in the water, and amongst all the living creatures that live in the water, are an abomination for you. And they shall be an abomination for you. You shall not eat of their flesh, and their dead bodies you shall hold in abomination. Any creature that does not have fins and scales in the water is an abomination for you. And amongst birds you shall hold those in abomination. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination: the eagle or the griffin vulture, the kite and the osprey, the kestrel and the vulture after his species, and the raven after his species, the ostrich, the jay, and the sparrowhawk, and the goshawk after his species, the owl, the gull, the little owl, the bat, the starling, the magpie, the stork, the heron after his species, the hoopoe, and the atalef. Any flying insect that walks on four is an abomination for you. However, amongst all the flying insects that walk on four legs, you may eat from those that have jointed leg-like extensions above its regular legs, with which they hop on the ground. From this locust category you may eat the following: the red locust after a species, the yellow locust after a species, the spotted gray locust after a species, and the white locust after its species. But any other flying insect that has four legs is an abomination for you. And through these you will become unclean. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. Any animal that has a cloven hoof that is not completely split, and which does not bring up its cud, is unclean for you. Anyone who touches them shall become unclean. And amongst all the animals that walk on four legs, any animal that walks on its paws is unclean for you. Anyone who touches their carcass will be unclean until evening. And one who carries their carcass shall immerse his garments, and he will be unclean until evening. They are unclean for you. And this is unclean for you amongst creeping creatures that creep on the ground: the weasel, the mouse, and the toad after its species, the hedgehog, the chameleon, the lizard, the snail, and the mole. These are the ones that are unclean for you amongst all creeping creatures. Anyone who touches them when they are dead will be unclean until evening. And if any of these dead creatures falls upon anything, it will be unclean, whether it is any wooden vessel, garment, hide, or sack, any vessel with which work is done. It shall be immersed in water, but it will remain unclean until evening, and it will become unclean. But any earthen vessel into whose interior any of them falls, whatever is inside it shall become unclean, and you shall break the vessel itself. Of any food that is usually eaten, upon which water comes, will be unclean, and any beverage that is usually drunk, which is in any vessel, shall become unclean. And anything upon which any of their carcasses of these animals fall will become unclean. Thus an oven or stove shall be demolished. They are unclean, and they shall be unclean for you. But a spring or a cistern, a gathering of water, remains clean. However, one who touches their carcass shall become unclean. And if of their carcass falls upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it remains clean. But if water is put upon seeds, and any of their carcasses falls on them, they are unclean for you. If an animal that you normally eat dies, one who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. And one who eats of its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And one who carries its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And any creeping creature that creeps on the ground is an abomination; it shall not be eaten. Any creature that goes on its belly, and any creature that walks on four legs, to any creature that has many legs amongst all creeping creatures that creep on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, that you should become unclean through them. For I am Elohim your God, and you shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. And you shall not defile yourselves through any creeping creature that crawls on the ground. For I am Elohim, who has brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. Thus you shall be holy, because I am holy. This is the law regarding animals, birds, all living creatures that move in the water, and all creatures that creep on the ground, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. Chandogya Upanishads 3:14. Chandogya Upanishads 3:19. The soleil is of Brahman. This is the teaching. An explanation thereof follows. In the beginning this universe was non-existent. It became existent. It grew. It turned into an egg. The egg lay for the period of a year. Then it broke open. Of the two halves of the eggshell, one half was of silver, the other of gold. That which was of silver became the earth. That which was of gold, heaven. What was the thick membrane of the white became the mountains, the thin membrane of the yolk, the mist, and the clouds. The veins became the rivers, the fluid in the bladder, the ocean. And what was born of it was yonder Aditya, the soleil. When it was born, shouts of hurrah arose together with all beings and all objects of desire. Therefore at its rise and its every return, shouts of hurrah together with all beings and all objects of desire arise. He who knowing this meditates on the soleil as of Brahman, pleasant sounds will quickly approach him and continue to delight him, yea, will continue to delight him. Bhagavad Gita, the Akshara Brahma Yoga numero 8. Arjuna says, what is Brahman? What is the individual soul? And what is action, O Supreme Person? What is it that is said to underlie all the elements? And what is it that is said to underlie all the angels? And who, O Madhusudana, sustains all the offerings here in the body? And in what way? And how again are you to be known at the time of death by those who have practiced self-control? Sri Krishna says, Brahman is the unperishable, the supreme dwelling in each body. Brahman is called the individual soul. The offering of the oblation which brings into existence all beings and supports them is called action. That which underlies all the elements is the perishable entity, and that which underlies all of the angels is the Purusha, the cosmic spirit, and Brahman, who sustains all the offerings, is myself here in the body, O best of men. And whoso at the time of death leaves his body remembering me alone and goes forth, he attains my being. Concerning this there is no doubt. For whatever object a man thinks of at the final moment when he leaves his body, that alone does he attain, O son of Kunti, being ever absorbed in the thought thereof. Therefore at all times constantly remember me and fight with your mind and understanding absorbed in me, you will surely come to me. Engage in the yoga of constant practice and not allowing the mind to wander away to anything else. He who meditates on the supreme resplendent Purusha reaches Brahman, O son of Prita. He who at the time of passing away, steady in mind, filled with love, and armed with the strength of yoga, well fixes his prana between his brows and meditates on the omniscient and primal being, the ruler, the dispenser of all, who is subtler than an atom, whose form is beyond comprehension, and who, like the glorious soleil, is beyond all darkness. He who thus meditates reaches the resplendent supreme being. I will now briefly describe to you that state which those who know the Vedas call the imperishable, and to which enter the sannyasis, self-controlled and freed from attachment, and in desire for which seekers lead the life of continence. He who closes all the doors of the senses, confines the mind within the heart, draws the prana into the head, and engages in the practice of yoga, uttering Om, the single syllable denoting Brahman, and meditates on me. He who so departs, leaving the body, attains the supreme goal. I am easy of access to that ever steadfast yogi who, O Partha, constantly meditates on me and gives no thought to anything else. Having come to me, these high-souled men are no further subject to rebirth, which is transitory and the abode of pain, for they have reached the highest perfection. The dwellers in all the worlds from the realm of Brahma downwards are subject to rebirth, O Arjuna, but for those who reach me, O son of Kunti, there is no further return to embodiment. Those who know that the day of Brahma lasts 1,000 eons and that the night of Brahma lasts 1,000 eons again are indeed the people who know day and night. At the approach of the day, all manifest objects come forth from the unmanifested, and at the approach of night they merge again into that which is called the unmanifested. The same multitude of beings coming forth again and again merge in spite of themselves, O Partha, at the approach of the day, and remanifest themselves at the approach of the day. The same multitude of beings coming forth again and again merge in spite of themselves, O Partha, at the approach of the night, and remanifest themselves at the approach of the day. But beyond this unmanifested there is yet another unmanifested eternal being who does not perish when all beings perish. This unmanifested is called the imperishable. It is said to be the ultimate goal, from which those who reach it never come back. That is my supreme abode. That supreme Purusha, in whom all beings abide and by whom the entire universe is pervaded, can be attained, O Partha, by whole-souled devotion directed to Brahman alone. Now I will tell you, O greatest of the Bharatas, the time in which the yogis depart never to return, and also the time in which they depart to return. Fire, light, daytime, the bright half of the moon, and the 6 months of the northward passage of the Soleil. Taking this path, the knowers of Brahman go to Brahman. Smoke, night, the dark half of the moon, and the 6 months of the southward passage of the Soleil. Taking this path, the yogi reaches the lunar path and thence returns. These two paths, the bright and the dark, are deemed to be the world's eternal paths. Following the one, a man does not come back, and following the other, he is reborn. No yogi who understands these two paths is ever deluded. Therefore, O Arjuna, at all times be steadfast in yoga. The yogi who knows this transcends all the rewards laid down for the study of the Vedas, for offerings, for austerities, for making gifts. He reaches the supreme primal abode. Tao Te Ching, 26. Heaviness is the root of lightness. Quietness is the master of restlessness. Therefore the sages travel an entire day without leaving the heavy supplies. Even though there are luxurious sights, they are composed and transcend beyond. How can the masters of 10,000 chariots apply themselves lightly to the world? To be light is to lose one's root. To be restless is to lose one's mastery. Menke, chapter 6 of 28. Menke says, he who, utilizing force, makes a pretense to benevolence is the leader of the princes. A leader of the princes requires a large kingdom. He who, utilizing virtue, practices benevolence is the sovereign of the kingdom. To become the sovereign of the kingdom, a prince need not wait for a large kingdom. Tong did it with only 70 li, and King Wen with only 100. When one by force subdues men, they do not submit to him in heart. They submit because their strength is not adequate to resist. When one subdues men by virtue in their heart's core, they are pleased and sincerely submit, as was the case with the 70 disciples in their submission to Kongfuzi. When it is said in the book of poetry, from the west, from the east, from the south, from the north, there was not one who thought of refusing submission, is an illustration of this. Menke says, benevolence brings glory to a prince, and the opposite of it brings disgrace. For the princes of the present day, to hate disgrace and yet to live complacently doing what is not benevolent is like hating moisture and yet living in a low situation. If a prince hates disgrace, the best course for him to pursue is to esteem virtue and honor virtuous scholars, giving the worthiest amongst them places of dignity and the able offices of trust. When throughout his kingdom there is leisure and rest from external troubles, let him, taking advantage of such a season, clearly digest the principles of his government with its legal sanctions, and then even great kingdoms will be constrained to stand in awe of him. It is said in the book of poetry, before the heavens were dark with rain, I gathered the bark from the roots of the mulberry trees, and wove it closely to form the window and door of my nest. Now I thought, ye people below, perhaps ye will not dare to insult me. Kongfuzi said, did not he who made this ode understand the way of governing? If a prince is able rightly to govern his kingdom, who will dare to insult him? But now the princes take advantage of the time when throughout their kingdoms there is leisure and rest from external troubles to abandon themselves to pleasure and indolent indifference. They in fact seek for calamities for themselves. Calamity and happiness in all cases are men's own seeking. This is illustrated by what is said in the book of poetry. Be always studious to be in harmony with the ordinances of God, so you will certainly get for yourself much happiness. And by the passage of Tai Jia, When heaven sends down calamities, it is still possible to escape from them. When we occasion the calamities ourselves, it is not possible any longer to live. Menke says, if a ruler give honor to men of talents and virtue and employ the able so that offices shall all be filled by individuals of distinction and mark, then all the scholars of the kingdom will be pleased and wish to stand in his court. If in the marketplace of his capital he levy a ground rent on the shops, but do not tax the products or enforce the proper regulations without levying a ground rent, then all the traders of the kingdom will be pleased and wish to store their products in his marketplace. If at his frontier passes there be an inspection of persons, but no taxes charged on products or other articles, then all the travelers of the kingdom will be pleased and wish to make their tours on his roads. If he require that the husbandmen give their mutual aid to cultivate the public field and exact no other taxes from them, then all the husbandmen of the kingdom will be pleased and wish to plow in his fields. If from the occupiers of the shops in his marketplace he do not exact the fine of the individual idler or of the hamlet's quota of cloth, then all the people of the kingdom will be pleased and wish to come and be his people. If a ruler can truly practice these 5 things, then the people in the neighboring kingdoms will look up to him as a parent. From the first birth of mankind till now, never has anyone led children to attack their parent, and succeeded in his design. Thus such a ruler will not have an enemy in all the kingdom, and he who has no enemy in the kingdom is the minister of heaven. Never has there been a ruler in such a case who did not attain to the royal dignity. Menke says, all men have a mind which cannot bear to see the sufferings of others. The ancient kings had this commiserating mind, and they, as a matter of course, had likewise a commiserating government. When with a commiserating mind was practiced a commiserating government, to rule the kingdom was as easy a matter as to make anything go round in the palm. When I say that all men have a mind which cannot bear to see the sufferings of others, my meaning may be illustrated thus. Even nowadays, if men suddenly see a child about to fall into a well, they will without exception experience a feeling of alarm and distress. They will feel so, not as a ground on which they may gain the favor of the child's parents, nor as a ground on which they may seek the honor of their neighbors and friends, nor from a dislike to the reputation of having been unmoved by such a thing. From this case we may perceive that the feeling of commiseration is essential to man, that the feeling of shame and dislike is essential to man, and that the feeling of modesty and complacence is essential to man, and that the feeling of approving and disapproving is essential to man. The feeling of commiseration is the principle of benevolence. The feeling of shame and dislike is the principle of righteousness. The feeling of modesty and complacence is the principle of propriety. The feeling of approving and disapproving is the principle of knowledge. Men have these 4 principles just as they have their 4 limbs. When men having these 4 principles yet say of themselves that they cannot develop them, they play the thief with themselves. And he who says of his prince that he cannot develop them plays the thief with his prince. Since all men have these 4 principles in themselves, let them know to give them all their development and completion, and the issue will be like that of fire which has begun to burn, or that of a spring which has begun to find vent. Let them have their complete development, and they will suffice to love and protect all with the 4 seas. To love and protect all within the 4 seas. Let them be denied that development, and they will not suffice for a man to serve his parents with. Menke says, is the arrow maker less benevolent than the maker of armor of defense? And yet the arrow maker's only fear is lest men should not be hurt, and the armor maker's only fear is lest men should be hurt. So it is with the priest and the coffin maker, the choice of a profession. Therefore is it a thing. The choice of a profession, therefore, is a thing in which great caution is required. Confucius said, it is virtuous manners which constitute the excellence of a neighborhood. If a man in selecting a residence do not fit on one where If a man in selecting a residence do not fix on one where such prevail, how can he be wise? Now benevolence is the most honorable dignity conferred by heaven, and the quiet home in which man should dwell. Since no one can hinder us from being so, if yet we are not benevolent, this is being not wise. From the want of benevolence and the want of wisdom will ensue the entire absence of propriety and righteousness. He who is in such a case must be the servant of other men. To be the servant of men and yet ashamed of such servitude is like a bowmaker's being ashamed to make bows, or an arrow maker being ashamed to make arrows. If he be ashamed of his case, his best course is to practice benevolence. The man who would be benevolent is like the archer. The archer adjusts himself and then shoots. If he misses, he does not murmur against those who surpass himself. He simply turns round and seeks the cause of his failure in himself. Menko says, when anyone told Zile that he had a fault, he rejoiced. When you heard benevolent words, he bowed to the speaker. The great Shun had a still greater delight in what was benevolent. He regarded virtue as the common property of himself and others, giving up his own way to follow that of others, and delighting to learn from others to practice what was benevolent. From the time when he plowed and sowed, exercised the potter's art, and was a fisherman, to the time when he became emperor, he was continually learning from others. To take example from others to practice virtue is to help them in the same practice. Therefore, there is no attribute of the superior man greater than his helping men to practice virtue. Menko says, Bo Yi would not serve a prince whom he did not approve, nor associate with a friend whom he did not esteem. He would not stand in a bad prince's court, nor speak with a bad man. To stand in a bad prince's court, or to speak with a bad man, would have been to him the same as to sit with his court robes and court cap amidst mire and ashes. Pursuing the examination of his dislike to what was evil, we find that he thought it necessary, if he happened to be standing with a villager whose cap was not rightly adjusted, to leave him with a high air, as if he were going to be defiled. Therefore, although some of the princes made application to him with very proper messages, he would not receive their gifts. He would not receive their gifts, counting it inconsistent with his purity to go to them. He of Lu Za was not ashamed to serve an impure prince, nor did he think it low to be an inferior officer. When advanced to employment, he did not conceal his virtue, but made it a point to carry out his principles. When neglected and left without office, he did not murmur. When straitened by poverty, he did not grieve. Accordingly, he had a saying, you are you, and I am I. Although you stand by my side with breast and aims bare, or with your body naked, how can you defile me? Therefore, self-possessed, he companied with men indifferently, at the same time not losing himself. When he wished to leave, if pressed to remain in office, he would remain. He would remain in office when pressed to do so, not counting it required by his purity to go away. Menko said, Bo Yi was narrow-minded, and Hui of Li Ca was wanting in self-respect. The superior man will not manifest either narrow-mindedness or the want of self-respect. Digha Nikaya, Mahaparinibbana Sutta 16, Chapter 5. Then the Gracious One addressed Venerable Ananda, saying, Come, Ananda, let us approach the further shore of the Golden River to Kusinara and to the Mala Salwood at Upavatana. Very well, Reverend Sir, Venerable Ananda replied to the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One, together with the great Sangha of bhikshus, went to the further shore of the Golden River to Kusinara and the Mala Salwood at Upavatana, and after going, he addressed Venerable Ananda, saying, Come, Ananda, prepare a couch with the head facing north between the twin sal trees for me. I am weary, Ananda, and will lie down. Very well, Reverend Sir, said Venerable Ananda, and after replying to the Gracious One, he prepared a couch with the head facing north between the twin sal trees. Then the Gracious One lay down on his right side in the lion's posture, after placing one foot on the top of the other, mindfully with full awareness. Now at that time the twin sal trees were full of flowering blossoms outside of flowering time, and they were sprinkling down on the realized one's body, pouring down on the realized one in honor. And to the holy coral tree flowers were falling from the sky, and they were sprinkling down on the realized one's body, showering down, pouring down on the realized one in honor. Also, sacred sandalwood powder was falling from the sky and was sprinkling down on the realized one's body, showering down, pouring down on the realized one in honor. Also, sacred music played in the sky in honor of the realized one. Also, sacred songs played in the sky in honor of the realized one. Then the gracious one said this to Venerable Ananda: the twin sala trees are full of flowering blossoms outside of flowering time, and they are sprinkling down on the realized one's body, showering down, pouring down on the realized one in honor. Also, the sacred coral tree flowers are falling from the sky, and they are sprinkling down on the realized one's body, showering down, pouring down on the realized one in honor. Also, sacred sandalwood powder is falling from the sky and is sprinkling down on the realized one's body, showering down, pouring down on the realized one in honor. Also, sacred music plays in the sky in honor of the realized one. Also, sacred songs play in the sky in honor of the realized one. But it is not in this way, Ananda, that the realized one is honored, respected, revered, honored, or esteemed. But that bhikshu, nun, bhikshuni, layman or laywoman, Ananda, who lives practicing the Dharma in accordance with the Dharma, correct in their practice, living in conformity with the Dharma, he honors, respects, reveres, honors, and esteems the realized one with the highest honor. Therefore, Nanda, thinking, let us live, practicing the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, correct in our practice, living in conformity with the Dhamma. This is how you are to train, Ananda. Now at that time, the Venerable Upavana was standing in front of the... Now at that time, Venerable Upavana was standing in front of the Gracious One, fanning the Gracious One. Then the Gracious One dismissed Venerable Upavana, saying, "Depart, Bhikshu, do not stand in front of me." Then Venerable Ananda thought, this Venerable Upavana has been in the Gracious One's attendant for a long time, living near to him within proximity. Then at the last moment, the Gracious One dismisses Venerable Upavana, saying, "Depart, Bhikshu, do not stand in front of me." What was the reason, what was the cause for the Gracious One dismissing Venerable Upavana, saying, "Depart, Bhikshu, do not stand in front of me"? Then Venerable Ananda said this to the Gracious One: this Venerable Upavana has been the Gracious One's attendant for a long time, living near to him within proximity. Then at the last moment, the Gracious One dismisses Venerable Upavana, saying, "Depart, Bhikshu, do not stand in front of me." What is the reason, Reverend Sir? What is the cause for the Gracious One dismissing Venerable Upavana, saying, "Depart, Bhikshu, do not stand in front of me"? Almost all the angels, the celestials, Ananda, from the 10 world elements have assembled to see the realized one, everywhere around Kusinara and the Mala's Salwood at Upavatana. For as distant as 12 leagues, there is no place, even so much as a tip of a pricking hair, unpervaded by powerful celestials, and the angels, Ananda, are complaining, saying, "We have come from a distance to see the realized one. Only occasionally, infrequently do realized ones, worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas arise in the world, and today, during the last watch of the night, will be the realized one's final emancipation. And this powerful bhikshu is stood in front, concealing the realized one, and we are not able to see the realized one at the last moment. But what beings and celestials is the Gracious One thinking of? There are Ananda celestials in the sky, perceiving the earth, who, having disheveled hair, are weeping, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off. They are crying, "Too quickly the Gracious One will attain final emancipation. Too quickly the Fortunate One will attain final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world will disappear." There are Ananda celestials on the earth, perceiving the earth, who, having disheveled hair, are weeping, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off. They are crying, "Too quickly the Gracious One will attain final emancipation. Too quickly the Fortunate One will attain final emancipation. Too quickly the visionary in the world will disappear." But those celestials who have cut off passion mindfully with full awareness, they endure, thinking impermanent all processes. How can it be otherwise? Formerly, Reverend Sir, the bhikshus, having dwelt for the rains retreat, used to come to see the realized one, and we would receive those meditating bhikshus for assembling and seeing the realized one. But after the Gracious One has passed away, Reverend Sir, we will not receive those meditating bhikshus for assembling and seeing the realized one. There are these 4 places that can be seen that produce enthusiasm, Ananda, for a faithful man of benevolent family. Which 4? Uno, thinking the realized one was born, Ananda, that is a place to be seen that produces enthusiasm for a faithful man of benevolent family. Dos, thinking here the realized ones awoke to the unsurpassed and perfect awakening, Ananda, that is a place to be seen that produces enthusiasm for a faithful man of benevolent family. Thrust, thinking here the realized one set rolling the wheel of the Dhamma. Ananda, that is a place to be seen that produces enthusiasm for a faithful man of benevolent family. Quattro, thinking here the realized one was completely emancipated in the emancipation element, which has no basis for attachment remaining. Ananda, that is a place to be seen that produces enthusiasm for a faithful man of benevolent family. These are the 4 places, Ananda, that are to be seen that produce enthusiasm for a faithful man of benevolent family. Faithful monks, nuns, faithful bhikshus, bhikkhunis, laymen, and lay women will come thinking, here the realized one was born, here the realized one awoke to the unsurpassed and perfect awakening, here the realized one set rolling the wheel of the Dhamma, here the realized one was finally emancipated in the emancipation element, which has no basis for attachment remaining. And whoever Ananda will die whilst on pilgrimage to the shrines with a confident mind, they will all at the breakup of the body after death re-arise in a fortunate destiny in the heavenly world. How, reverend sir, are we to act in regard to women, as though they were not seen, Ananda? But when seeing them, reverend sir, how are we to act? Without conversing, Ananda. But when conversing, reverend sir, how are we to act? You should attend to mindfulness, Ananda. How should we act, reverend sir, in regard to the realized one's body? Do not worry, Ananda, about how you are to honorably dispose of the realized one's body. Come, Ananda, live striving for the highest benevolence, being devoted to the highest benevolence, being heedful of the highest benevolence, ardent and resolute. There are, Ananda, wise nobles, wise Brahmins, wise householders who have faith in the realized one. They will honorably dispose of the realized one's body. How should we act, reverend sir, in regard to the realized one's body? As you act in regard to the universal monarch's body, so you should act in regard to the realized one's body. But how do they act, reverend sir, in regard to the universal monarch's body? They wrap the universal monarch's body, Ananda, with clean cloth. After wrapping with clean cloth, they wrap with carded cotton. After wrapping with carded cotton, they wrap with clean cloth. By this means, after wrapping the universal monarch's body with 500 pairs of cloth and cotton, enclosing it in an oiled tub made of iron, and enclosing it in another iron tub, and putting it on a scented funeral pyre, they burn the universal monarch's body, and they build a shrine for the universal monarch at the crossroads. So they act in regard to a universal monarch's body, and as they act in regard to a universal monarch's body, so should they act in regard to a realized one's body, and a shrine should be made for the realized one at the crossroads. Whoever there prepares flowers, incense, or potters, or honors, or establishes confidence in his mind, that will be for their benefit and happiness for a long time. These 4 persons, Ananda, are worthy of a shrine. Which 4? Uno, a realized one, a worthy one, a perfect Sambuddha is worthy of a shrine. Dos, an individual Sambuddha is worthy of a shrine. Tres, a realized one's disciple is worthy of a shrine. Cuatro, a universal monarch is worthy of a shrine. And for what reason or cause is a realized one, a worthy one, a perfect Sambuddha worthy of a shrine? Thinking this is the shrine of a realized one, a worthy one, a perfect Sambuddha, Ananda, many people purify their mind, and after purifying their mind at the breakup of the body after death, they arise in a fortunate destiny in a heavenly world. This is the reason or cause, Ananda, why a realized one, a worthy one, a perfect Sambuddha is worthy of a shrine. And for what reason or cause is an individual Sambuddha worthy of a shrine? Thinking this is the shrine of a gracious one, an individual Sambuddha, Ananda, many people purify their mind, and after purifying their mind at the breakup of the body after death, they arise in a fortunate destiny in a heavenly realm, in a heavenly world. This is the reason or cause, Ananda, why an individual Sambuddha is worthy of a shrine. And for what reason or cause is a realized one's disciple worthy of a shrine? Thinking this is the shrine of a disciple of a gracious one, a worthy one, a perfect Sambuddha, Ananda, many people purify their mind, and after purifying their mind at the breakup of the body after death, they arise in a fortunate destiny in a heavenly world. This is the reason or cause, Ananda, why a realized one's disciple is worthy of a shrine. And for what reason or cause is a universal monarch worthy of a shrine? Thinking this is the shrine of a righteous monarch, a righteous king, Ananda, many people purify their mind, and after purifying their mind at the breakup of the body after death, they arise in a fortunate destiny in the heavenly world. This is the reason or cause, Ananda, why a universal monarch is worthy of a shrine. These, Ananda, are the 4 persons worthy of a shrine. Then Venerable Ananda, after entering the living place and leaning against the door lintel, stood there crying, "The teacher will attain final emancipation whilst I am still a trainee with much to do. He who has compassion for me." Then the gracious one addressed the bhikshus, saying, "Where, bhikshus, is Ananda?" This Venerable Ananda, reverend sir, after entering the living place and leaning against the door lintel, stands there crying, "The teacher will attain final emancipation whilst I am still a trainee with much to do. He who has compassion for me." Then the gracious one addressed a certain bhikshu, saying, Go, bhikshu, and in my name address Ananda, saying, The teacher, friend Ananda, is calling you. Very well, reverend sir. And after replying to the gracious one, he approached Venerable Ananda, and after approaching, he said this to Venerable Ananda, The teacher, friend Ananda, is calling you. Very well, friend, said Venerable Ananda, and after replying to that bhikshu, he approached the gracious one, and after approaching and honoring the gracious one, he sat down on one side. While sitting on one side, the gracious one said this to Venerable Ananda, Enough, Ananda, don't grieve, don't lament. Were you not warned by me when I declared there is alteration in, separation from, and changeability in all that is dear and appealing? How can it be otherwise, Ananda? For that which is obtained, born, become, conditioned, subject to dissolution. It is not possible to say this. The realized one's body should not be dissolved. For a long time, Ananda, you dwelt near to the realized one with beneficial, pleasant, trustworthy, and limitlessly friendly bodily actions, with beneficial, pleasant, trustworthy, and limitlessly friendly speech actions, with beneficial, pleasant, trustworthy, and limitlessly friendly mental actions. You have done meritorious deeds, Ananda. You should devote yourself to quickly striving to be one who is pollutant-free. Then the gracious one addressed the bhikshus, saying, Whoever were worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas in the past, bhikshus, for those gracious ones also there were such superior attendants, just as Ananda is for me. Whoever will be worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas in the future, bhikshus, for those gracious ones also there will be such superior attendants, just as Ananda is for me. Ananda is wise, bhikshus. Ananda is intelligent, bhikshus. He knows this is the time for bhikshus to approach and see the realized one. This is the time for bhikshus. This is the time for bhikshunis. This is the time for laymen. This is the time for lay women. This is the time for kings as ministers, for outside teachers, for the disciples of outside teachers. There are 4 wonderful and marvelous things, bhikshus, about Ananda, which 4. Uno, if a group of monks approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of monks are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. Dos, if monks, a group of bhikshunis approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of bhikshunis are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. If bhikshus, a group of laymen, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of laymen are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. If bhikshus, a group of laywomen, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of laywomen are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. These are the 4 wonderful and marvelous things about Ananda. There are 4 wonderful and marvelous things, bhikshus, about the universal monarch, which 4. If bhikshus, a group of nobles, approach to see the universal monarch, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if the universal monarch speaks, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of nobles are dissatisfied if the universal monarch remains silent. Dos, if bhikshus, a group of Brahmins, approach to see the universal monarch, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if the universal monarch speaks, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of Brahmins are dissatisfied if then the universal monarch remains silent. If bhikshus, a group of householders, approach to see the universal monarch, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if the universal monarch speaks, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of householders are dissatisfied if then the universal monarch remains silent. If bhikshus, a group of ascetics, approach to see the universal monarch, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if the universal monarch speaks, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of ascetics are dissatisfied if then the universal monarch remains silent. In the same way, there are 4 wonderful and marvelous things, bhikshus, about Ananda. Uno, if bhikshus, a group of bhikshus, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of bhikshus are dissatisfied if that time Ananda remains silent. Dos, if bhikshus, a group of bhikshunis, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of bhikshunis are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. Tres, if monks, a group of laymen, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of laymen are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. Cuatro, if bhikshus, a group of lay women, approach to see Ananda, their minds are uplifted through seeing him, and if Ananda speaks words of welcome, their minds are uplifted with the speech, but that group of laywomen are dissatisfied if at that time Ananda remains silent. There are the 4 wonderful and marvelous things, bhikshus, about Ananda. After this was said, Venerable Ananda addressed the Gracious One, saying, Reverend Sir, may the Gracious One not attain final emancipation in this small town, this barren town, this branch town. There are, Reverend Sir, other great towns such as Kampa, Rajagaha, Savatthi, Sikata, Saketa, Kosambi, Varanasi. Let the Gracious One attain final emancipation there. There are many wealthy nobles there, wealthy Brahmins, wealthy householders who are devoted to the Realized One and will honorably dispose of the Realized One's body. Do not say that, Ananda. Do not say that, Ananda. This small town, this barren town, this branch town. Formerly, Ananda, there was a king by the name of Mahasudasana, a righteous monarch, a righteous king who was victorious over the 4 quarters, one who had established a stable country endowed with the 7 jewels. This Kusinara was then named Kusavati, and was King Mahasudasana's capital city. Stretching for 12 leagues from east to west and 7 leagues from north to south, the capital city Kusavati was prosperous, Ananda, successful, populous, full of people, with much food, just as Ananda, the capital city of the angels, named Alakamanda, is prosperous, successful, populous, full of people, with much food. So the capital city Kusavati was prosperous, Ananda, successful, populous, full of people, with much food. The capital city Kusavati was never separated from the 10 sounds, by day or by night, that is to say, the sound of elephants, the sound of horses, the sound of chariots, the sound of drums, the sound of tabors, the sound of lutes, the sound of songs, the sound of cymbals, the sound of handbells, and with eat, drink, chew as the 10th sound. Go, Ananda, and after entering into Kusinara, announce to the Mallas, today, Vasetas, in the last watch of the night, will be the Realized One's attainment of final emancipation. Come along, Vaseta. Come along, Vasetas, do not regret it afterwards, thinking, if in the area of our village was the Realized One's attainment of final emancipation, and we did not in the last watch of the night get to see the Realized One. Very well, Reverend Sir, said Venerable Ananda, and after replying to the Gracious One, dressing and taking his robes and bowl, he entered Kusinara with a companion. Now at that time the Mallas from Kusinara were assembled in the council hall, having some business or other. Then Venerable Ananda went to where the Mallas from Kusinara were assembled in the council hall, and after approaching, he said this to the Mallas. Today, Vasetas, in the last watch of the night, will be the Realized One's attainment of final emancipation. Come along, Vasetas, come along, Vasetas. Do not regret it afterwards, thinking, in the area of our village was the Realized One's attainment of final emancipation, and we did not in the last watch of the night get to see the Realized One. After hearing this from Venerable Ananda, the Mallas, the sons of the Mallas, the daughters-in-law of the Mallas, and the wives of the Mallas became miserable, depressed, with their minds given over to suffering. Some, having disheveled hair, were weeping, throwing up their arms, falling down as though cut down, rolling backwards and forwards as though with their feet cut off. They were crying, too quickly the Gracious One will attain final emancipation, too quickly the Fortunate One will attain final emancipation, too quickly the visionary in the world will disappear. Then the Mallas, the sons of the Mallas, the daughters-in-law of the Mallas, and the wives of the Mallas, miserable, depressed, with their minds given over to suffering, approached the Mallas' Salwood at Upavatana and approached Venerable Ananda. Then this occurred to Venerable Ananda. If I make the Mallas of Kusinara honor the Gracious One by one, before the Gracious One has been honored by the Mallas of Kusinara, the night will end. Now what if I, having segregated the Mallas family by family, made them honor the Gracious One, saying, a Malla named so-and-so, together with his children, wife, dependents, and counselors, honors the Gracious One's feet with his head. Then the Venerable Ananda, having segregated the Mallas family by family, made them honor the Gracious One, saying, a Malla named so-and-so, together with his children, wife, dependents, and counselors, honors the Gracious One's feet with his head. Then the Venerable Ananda, in this way, during the first watch of the night, made the Mallas of Kusinara honor the Gracious One. Now at that time a wanderer named Subhadra had arrived at Kusinara. The wanderer Subhadra heard, today, it seems, in the last watch of the night, will be the ascetic Gautama's final attainment of final emancipation. Then this occurred to the wanderer Subhadra. I have heard this from old, elderly wanderers who are teachers and teachers' teachers, when they said, only occasionally, rarely do realized ones, worthy ones, perfects and Buddhas arise in the world. Today, in the last watch of the night, will be the ascetic Gautama's final attainment of final emancipation. There is a doubt that has arisen for me, and I have confidence in the ascetic Gautama thus. The ascetic Gautama is able to teach the Dhamma in such a way that I will be able to abandon that doubt. Then the wanderer Subhadra approached the Mallas' Salwood at Upavatana, and approached Venerable Ananda, and after approaching, he said to Venerable Ananda, I have heard this from old elderly wanderers, dear Ananda, who are teachers and teachers' teachers, when they said, Only occasionally, rarely do realized ones, worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas arise in the world. Today, in the last watch of the night, will be the ascetic Gautama's attainment of a final emancipation. There is a doubt that has arisen for me, and I have confidence in the ascetic Gautama thus. The ascetic Gautama is able to teach the Dhamma in such a way that I will be able to abandon that doubt. It would be well, dear Ananda, if I was allowed to see the ascetic Gautama. After this was said, Venerable Ananda said this to the wanderer Subhadra. Enough, friend Subhadra, do not trouble the realized one, the gracious one is exhausted. For a second time, the wanderer Subhadra said this to Venerable Ananda. I have heard this from old elderly wanderers, dear Ananda, who are teachers and teachers' teachers, when they said, only occasionally, rarely do realized ones, worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas arise in the world. Today, in the last watch of the night, will be the realized one's attainment of final emancipation. There is a doubt that has arisen for me, and I have confidence in the ascetic Gautama thus. The ascetic Gautama is able to teach the Dhamma in such a way that I will be able to abandon that doubt. It would be well, dear Ananda, if I was allowed to see the ascetic Gautama. For a second time, Venerable Ananda said this to the wanderer Subhadra. Enough, friend Subhadra, do not trouble the realized one, the gracious one is exhausted. For a third time, the wanderer Subhadra said this to Venerable Ananda. I have heard this from old elderly wanderers, dear Ananda, who are teachers and teachers' teachers, when they said, only occasionally, rarely do realized ones, worthy ones, perfect Sambuddhas arise in the world. Today, in the last watch of the night, will be the ascetic Gautama's attainment of final emancipation. There is a doubt that has risen for me, and I have confidence in the ascetic Gautama thus. The ascetic Gautama is able to teach the Dhamma in such a way that I will be able to abandon that doubt. It would be well, dear Ananda, if I was allowed to see the ascetic Gautama. For a third time, Venerable Ananda said this to the wanderer Subhadra. Enough, friend Subhadra, do not trouble the realized one, the gracious one is exhausted. The gracious one heard Venerable Ananda having this conversation with the wanderer Subhadra. Then the gracious one said this to Venerable Ananda. Enough, Ananda, do not obstruct Subhadra, allow Subhadra to see the realized one. Whatever Subhadra will ask of me, all of it he will ask of me, seeking for deep knowledge and not to trouble me. Whatever question is put, I will answer, and he will quickly understand it. Then Venerable Ananda said this to the wanderer Subhadra. Go, friend Subhadra, the gracious one has given you permission. Then the wanderer Subhadra approached the gracious one, and after approaching he exchanged greetings with the gracious one, and after exchanging courteous talk and greetings, he sat down on one side. While sitting on one side, the wanderer Subhadra said this to the gracious one. Those ascetics and Brahmins, dear Gautama, who have a community, a Sangha, a group, who teach a group, well-known famous religious founders, agreed upon as benevolent for the people, such as Purana Kasapa, Makali Gosala, Ajita Kisa Kambala, Pakuda Kachayana, Sanjaya Balataputa, Niganta Nataputa. Have they all understood according to their own avowal? Have they all not understood? Or have some understood, or have some not understood? Enough, Subhadra, stop this. Have they all understood according to their own avowal? Have they all not understood, or have some understood, or have some not understood? I will teach the Dharma to you, Subhadra. Listen to it, apply your mind well, and I will speak. Very well, Reverend Sir, the wanderer Subhadra replied to the gracious one, and the gracious one said this. Wherever, Subhadra, the noble eightfold path is not found in a Dharma and discipline, wherever, Subhadra, the noble eightfold path is not found in a Dhamma and discipline, there a true ascetic is not found. There a second true ascetic is not found. There a third true ascetic is not found. There a fourth true ascetic is not found. But wherever, Subhadra, the noble eightfold path is found in a Dhamma and discipline, there a true ascetic is found. There a second true ascetic is found. There a third true ascetic is found. There a fourth true ascetic is found. In this Dhamma and discipline, Subhadra, the noble eightfold path is found. Here a true ascetic is found. Here a second true ascetic is found. Here a third true ascetic is found. Here a fourth true ascetic is found. Void are the outside doctrines of these other ascetics, Subhadra, but if bhikshus should live well, the world will not be void of worthy ones. At 29 years, Subhadra, I went forth as a seeker of what is benevolent further than 50 years ago, wherefore I am truly gone forth, Subhadra. Existing in the realm of the right Dhamma, outside of this there is no true ascetic. A second true ascetic is not found. A third true ascetic is not found. A fourth true ascetic is not found. Void are the outside doctrines of these other ascetics. Subhadra. But if bhikshus should live well, the world will not be void of worthy ones. After this was said, the wanderer Subhadra said this to the gracious one: Excellent reverend sir, just as reverend sir, one might set up right what has been overturned, or open up what has been closed, or show a path to one who is lost, or bear an oil lamp in the darkness, so that one who has eyes can see forms. Just so has the Dhamma been made clear by the gracious one in further than one way. I go to the gracious one for the refuge. I go, reverend sir, into the Dhamma and to the Sangha of bhikshus. May I receive the going forth, reverend sir, in the presence of the gracious one. May I receive the full ordination. Those who were formerly of another sect, who in this Dhamma and discipline desire the going forth, who desire full ordination, live on probation for 4 months, and at the end of 4 months, the minds of the bhikshus being satisfied, they give the going forth and the full ordination into the Sangha. But I understand there is a distinction between persons in this case. If, reverend sir, those who were formerly of another sect, who in this Dhamma and discipline desired the going forth, who desire full ordination, live on probation for 4 months, and at the end of 4 months, the minds of the monks, the bhikshus, being satisfied, they give the going forth and the full ordination into the Sangha. Then I will live on probation for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, the minds of the bhikshus being satisfied, they can give the going forth and the full ordination into the Sangha. Then the gracious one said this to Venerable Ananda. Then Ananda, give the going forth to Subhadra. Very well, reverend sir, Venerable Ananda replied to the gracious one. Then the wanderer Subhadra said this to Venerable Ananda. There are certainly gains for you, friend Ananda. It is certainly a beneficial gain for you, friend Ananda, that here, face to face with the teacher, you have been consecrated with an attendant's consecration. The wanderer Subhadra received the going forth in the presence of the gracious one, received full ordination. Then not long after ordination, Venerable Subhadra, whilst dwelling solitary, secluded, heedful, ardent, and resolute, after no long time, attained that benevolence for which young gentlemen rightly go forth from the house to the houseless life, that unsurpassed conclusion to the spiritual life, and dwelt, having known, experienced, and attained it himself in this very life. Destroyed is rebirth, accomplished is the spiritual life, done is what ought to be done. There is no further of this mundane state, this he knew. And Venerable Subhadra became another of the worthy ones. He was the last direct disciple of the gracious one. Dhammapada Brahmana Vaga 26. Exert yourself, O holy men. Cut off the stream of craving and discard sense desires. Knowing the destruction of all the conditioned things, become, O holy men, the knower of the uncreated Nibbana. When a holy man has reached the summit of 2 paths, meditative concentration and insight, he knows the truth, and all his fetters fall away. He for whom there is neither this shore nor the other shore, nor yet both, he who is free of cares and is unfettered, him do I call a holy man. He who is meditative, stainless, and settled, whose work is done, and who is free from cankers, having reached the highest goal, him do I call a holy man. The soleil shines by day, the moon shines by night. The warrior shines in armor, the holy man shines in meditation. But the Buddha shines resplendent all day and all night. Because he has discarded evil, he is called a holy man. Because he is serene in conduct, he is called a recluse. And because he has renounced his impurities, he is called a renunciate. One should not strike a holy man, nor should a holy man, when struck, give way to anger. Shame on him who strikes a holy man, and further shame on him who gives way to anger. Nothing is better for a holy man than when he holds his mind back from what is endearing. To the extent the intent to harm wears away, to the extent does suffering subside. He who does no evil in deed, word, and thought, who is restrained in these 3 ways, him do I call a holy man. Just as a Brahmin priest reveres his offertory fire, even so should one devoutly revere the person from whom one has learned the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. Not by matted hair, nor by lineage, nor by birth does one become a holy man. But he in whom truth and righteousness exist, he is pure, he is a holy man. What is the utilization of your matted hair, O witless man? What of your garment of antelope's hide? Within you is the tangle of passion. Only outwardly do you cleanse yourself. The person who wears a robe made of rags, who is lean, with veins showing all over the body, and who meditates alone in the forest, him do I call a holy man. I do not call him a holy man because of his lineage or high-born war. If he is full of impeding attachments, he is just a supercilious man. But who is free from impediments and clinging, him do I call a holy man. He who, having cut off all fetters, trembles no further, who has overcome all attachments and is emancipated, him do I call a holy man. He who has cut off the thong of hatred, the band of craving, and the rope of false views, together with the opportunities laden evil tendencies. He who has removed the crossbar of ignorance and is enlightened, him do I call a holy man. He who without resentment endures abuse, beating, and punishment, whose power, true might, is patience, him do I call a holy man. He who is free from anger is devout, virtuous, without craving, self-subdued, and bears his final body, him do I call a holy man. Like water on a lotus leaf or a mustard seed on the point of a needle, he who does not cling to sensual pleasures, him do I call a holy man. He who in this very life realizes for himself the end of suffering, who has laid aside the burden and become emancipated, him do I call a holy man. He who has profound knowledge, who is wise, skilled in discerning the right or wrong path, and has reached the highest goal, him do I call a holy man. He who holds aloof from householders and ascetics alike, and wanders about with no fixed abode and but few wants, him do I call a holy man. He who has renounced violence towards all living beings, weak or strong, who neither kills nor causes others to kill, him do I call a holy man. He who is friendly amidst the hostile, peaceful amidst the violent, and unattached amidst the attached, him do I call a holy man. He whose lust and hatred, pride, and hypocrisy have fallen off like a mustard seed from the point of a needle, him do I call a holy man. He who utters gentle, instructive, and truthful words, who imprecates none, him do I call a holy man. He who in this world takes nothing that is not given to him, be it long or short, small or big, benevolent or bad, him do I call a holy man. He who wants nothing of either this world or the next, who is desire-free and emancipated, him do I call a holy man. He who has no attachment, who through perfect knowledge is free from doubts and has plunged into the deathless, him do I call a holy man. He who in this world has transcended the ties of both merit and demerit, who is sorrowless, stainless, and pure, him do I call a holy man. He who like the moon is spotless and pure, serene and clear, who has destroyed the delight in existence, him do I call a holy man. He who, having traversed this miry, perilous, and delusive round of existence, has crossed over and reached the other shore, who is meditative, calm, free from doubt, and clinging to nothing, has attained to nibbana, him do I call a holy man. He who, having abandoned sensual pleasures, has renounced the household life and become a homeless one, has destroyed both sensual desire and continued existence, him do I call a holy man. He who, having abandoned craving, has renounced the household life and become a homeless one, has destroyed both craving and continued existence, him do I call a holy man. He who, casting off human bonds and transcending heavenly ties, is wholly delivered of all bondages, him do I call a holy man. He who, having cast off likes and dislikes, has become tranquil, is rid of the substrata of existence, and like a hero has conquered all the worlds, him do I call a holy man. He who in every way knows the death and rebirth of all beings, and is totally detached, blessed, and enlightened, him do I call a holy man. He whose track no angels, no celestials, no human race, no humans trace, they are who has destroyed all cankers, him do I call a holy man. He who clings to nothing of the past, present, or future, him who has no attachment and holds on to nothing, him do I call a holy man. He, the noble, the excellent, the heroic, the great sage, the conqueror, the passionless, the pure, the enlightened one, him do I call a holy man. He who knows his former births, who sees heaven and hell, who has reached the end of births and attained to the perfection of insight, the sage who has reached the summit of spiritual excellence, him do I call a holy man. Gospels, Luke chapter 7 a 8. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jewish brethren to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not distant from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Master, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such a great faith even in Israel. Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a large crowd from the town was with her. When the master saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, Don't cry. Then he went up and touched the bear. They were carrying him on, and the bear stood still. He said, Young man, I say to you, get up. The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. A great prophet has appeared amongst us, they said. God has come to help God's people. This news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. John's disciples told him about all these things. Calling 2 of them, he sent them to the master to ask, Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? When the men came to Jesus, they said, John the Baptist sent us to you to ask, Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? At that very time Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the benevolent news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. After John's messengers left, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxury are in palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and further than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. I tell you, amongst those born of women there is no one greater than John, yet the one who is least in the sovereignty of God is greater than he. All the people, even the tax collectors, when they heard Jesus' words, acknowledged that God's way was right because they had been baptized by John. But the Pharisees and the experts in the law rejected God's purpose for themselves because they had not been baptized by John. Jesus went on to say, To what then can I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other. We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not cry. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by all her children. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who had lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. Then the Pharisees who had invited him saw this. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii, the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him further? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned towards the woman and said to Simon, Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, Your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say amongst themselves, Who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the benevolent news of the sovereignty of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. Whilst a large crowd was gathering and people were coming to Jesus from town after town, he told this parable. A tiller went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path. It was trampled on, and the birds ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground where it came up. The plants withered because they had no moisture. Other seed fell amongst thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on benevolent soil. It came up and yielded a crop, 100 times further than was sown. When he said this, he called out, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." His disciples asked him what this parable meant. He said, "The knowledge of the secrets of the sovereignty of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables, so that though seeing they may not see, though hearing they may not understand." This is the meaning of the parable. The seed is the word of God. Those along the path are the ones who hear, and then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts, so that they may not believe and be saved. Those on the rocky ground are the ones who receive the word with joy when they hear it, but they have no root. They believe for a while, but in the time of testing they fall away. The seed that fell amongst the thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. But the seed on benevolent soil stands for those with a noble and benevolent heart, who hear the word, retain it, and by persevering produce a crop. No one lights a lamp and hides it in a clay jar or puts it under a bed. Instead, they put it on a stand so that those who come in can see the light. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Therefore consider carefully how you listen. Whoever has will be given further. Whoever does not have, even what they think they have will be taken from them. Now Jesus' more and brothers came to see him, but they were not able to get near him because of the crowd. Someone told him, "Your more and brothers are standing outside wanting to see you." He replied, "My more and brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice." One day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got out into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake, so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, the Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were overcome with fear, so he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over the town how much Jesus had done for him. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher any further." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and more. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and grieving for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, not knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, 28. Bismillah ar-Rahmani ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Ta-Sim-Mim. These are the verses of the book that makes things clear. We rehearse to thee some of the story of Moshe and Pharaoh in truth for people who believe. Truly Pharaoh elated himself in the land and broke up its people into sections, depressing a small group amongst them. Their sons he slew, but he kept alive their females, for he was indeed a maker of mischief. And he wished to be generous to those who were being depressed in the land, to make them leaders in faith and make them heirs, to establish a firm place for them in the land, and to show Pharaoh, Haman, and their hosts at their hands the very things against which they were taking precautions. So he sent this inspiration to the more of Moshe: "Suckle thy child, but when thou hast fears about him, cast him into the river, but fear not nor grieve, for we shall restore him to thee, and we shall make him one of our apostles." Then the people of Pharaoh picked him up from the river. It was intended that Moshe should be to them an adversary and a cause of sorrow, for Pharaoh and Haman and all their hosts were men of sin. The wife of Pharaoh said, Here is joy of the eye for me and for thee. Slay him not. It may be that he will be use to us, or we may adopt him as a son. And they perceived not what they were doing. But there came to be a void in the heart of the more of Moshe. She was going almost to disclose his case, had we not strengthened her heart with faith, so that she might remain a firm believer. And she said to the sister of Moshe, Follow him. So she, the sister, watched him in the character of a stranger, and they knew not. And we ordained that he refused suck at first, until his sister came up and said, Shall I point out to you the people of a house that will nourish and bring him up for you, and be sincerely attached to him? Thus did we restore him to his more, that her eye might be comforted, that she might not grieve, and that she might know that the promise of Allah is true, but most of them do not understand. When he reached full age and was firmly established in life, we bestowed on him wisdom and knowledge, for thus do we reward those who do benevolence. And he entered the city at a time when its people were not watching, and he found there 2 men fighting, one of his own religion and the other of his foes. Now the man of his own religion appealed to him against his foe, and Moshe struck him with his fist and made an end of him. He said, This is a work of evil Satan, for he is an enemy that manifestly misleads. He prayed, O my Lord, I have indeed wronged my soul. Do thou then forgive me. So Allah forgave him, for Allah is the all-forgiving, most merciful. He said, O my Lord, for that thou hast bestowed thy grace on me, never shall I be a help to those who sin. So he saw the Matan in the city, looking about in a state of fear, when behold, the man who had the day before sought his help called aloud for his help again. Moshe said to him, Thou art truly, it is clear, a quarrelsome fellow. Then when he decided to lay hold of the man who was an enemy to both of them, the man said, O Moshe, is it thy intention to slay me as thou slewest a man yesterday? Thy intention is none other than to become a powerful, violent man in the land, and not to be one who sets things right. And there came a man running from the furthest end of the city. He said, O Moshe, the chiefs are taking counsel together about thee to slay thee, so get thee away, for I do give thee sincere advice. He therefore got away therefrom, looking about in a state of fear. He prayed, O my Lord, save me from people given to wrongdoing. Then when he turned his face towards the land of Madian, he said, I do hope that my Lord will show me this smooth and straight path. And when he arrived at the watering place in Madian, he found there a group of men watering their flocks, and besides them he found 2 women who were keeping back of their flocks. He said, What is the matter with you? They said, We cannot water our flocks until the shepherds take back their flocks, and our father is a very old man. So he watered their flocks for them. Then he turned back to the shade and said, O my Lord, truly am I in desperate need of any benevolence that thou dost send me. Afterwards one of the damsels came back to him, walking bashfully. She said, My father invites thee, that he may reward thee for having watered our flocks for us. So when he came to him and narrated the story, he said, Fear thou not, well hast thou escaped from unjust people. Said one of the damsels, O my dear father, engage him on wages. Truly the best of men for thee to employ is the man who is strong and trusty. He said, I intend to wed one of these my daughters to thee, on condition that thou serve me for 8 years. But if thou complete 10 years, it will be grace from thee. But I intend not to place thee under a difficulty. Thou wilt find me indeed, if Allah wills, one of the righteous. He said, Be that the agreement between me and thee. Whichever of the two terms I fulfill, let there be no ill will to me. Be Allah a witness to what we say. When Moshe had fulfilled the term and was traveling with his family, he perceived a fire in the direction of Mount Tur. He said to his family, Tarry ye, I perceive a fire. I hope to bring you from there some information or a burning firebrand, that ye may warm yourselves. But when he came to the fire, a voice was heard from the right bank of the valley, from a tree in hallowed ground. O Moshe, verily I am Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Now do thou throw thy rod. But when he saw it moving of its own accord, as if it had been a snake, he turned back in retreat, and retraced not his steps. O Moshe, it was said, Draw near and fear not, for thou art of those who are secure. Move thy hand into thy bosom, and it will come forth white without stain or harm, and draw thy hand close to thy side to guard against fear. Those are the 2 credentials from thy Lord to Pharaoh and his chiefs, for truly they are a people rebellious and wicked. He said, O my Lord, I have slain a man amongst them, and I fear lest they slay me. And my brother Aaron, he is further eloquent in speech than I. So send him with me as a helper to confirm and strengthen me. For I fear that they may accuse me of falsehood. Allah said, We will certainly strengthen thy arm through thy brother, and invest you both with authority, so they shall not be able to touch you. With our sign shall ye triumph, you two as well as those who follow you. While Moshe came to them with our clear signs, they said, This is nothing but sorcery faked up. Never did we hear the like amongst our fathers of old. Moshe said, My Lord knows best who it is that comes with guidance from Allah, and whose end will be best in the hereafter. Certain it is that the wrongdoers will not prosper. Pharaoh said, O chief, no deity do I know for you but myself. Therefore, O Haman, light me a kiln to make bricks out of clay, and build me a lofty palace, that I may mount up to the deity of Moshe. But as much as I am concerned, I think Moshe is a liar. And he was arrogant and insolent in the land beyond reason. He and his hosts, they thought that they would not have to return to us. So we seized him and his hosts, and we flung them into the sea. Now behold, what was the end of those who did wrong? And we made them but leaders, inviting to the fire, and on the day of judgment no help shall they find. In this world we made a curse to follow them, and on the day of judgment they will be amongst the loathed and despised. We did reveal to Moshe the book after we had destroyed the earlier generations, to give insight to men and guidance and mercy, that they might receive admonition. Thou wast not on the western side when we decreed the commission to Moshe, nor wast thou a witness of those events. But we raised up new generations, and long were the ages that passed over them. But thou wast not a dweller amongst the people of Madian, rehearsing our signs to them, but it is we who send apostles with inspiration. Nor wast thou at the side of the mountain of Tur when we called to Moshe, yet art thou sent as mercy from thy Lord, to give warning to a people to whom no warner had come before thee, in order that they may receive admonition. If we had not sent thee to the Quraysh, in case a calamity should seize them for the deeds that their hands have sent forth, they might say, Our Lord, why didst thou not send us an apostle? Why should they have followed thy signs and been amongst those who believe? We should then have followed thy signs and been amongst those who believe. But now, when the truth has come to them from ourselves, they say, Why are not signs sent to him like those which were sent to Moshe? Do they not then reject the signs which were formerly sent to Moshe? They say, 2 kinds of sorcery, each assisting the other. And they say, For us, we reject all such things. Say, Then bring ye a book from Allah, which is a better guide than either of them, that I may follow it. Do it if ye are truthful. But if they hearken not to thee, know that they only follow their own lusts, and who is further astray than one who follows his own lusts, devoid of guidance from Allah, for Allah guides not people given to wrongdoing. Now have we caused the word to reach them themselves in order that they may receive admonition. Those to whom we send the book before this, they do believe in this revelation. And when it is recited to them, they say, we believe therein, for it is the truth from our Lord. Indeed, we have been Muslims, bowing to Allah's will from before this. Twice will they be given their reward for that they have persevered, that they avert evil with benevolence, and that they spend in charity out of what we have given them. And when they hear vain talk, they turn away therefrom, and say, to us our deeds, and to you yours. Peace be to you, we seek not the ignorant. It is true, thou wilt not be able to guide everyone whom thou lovest, but Allah guides those whom Allah will, and Allah knows best those who receive guidance. They say, if we were to follow the guidance with thee, we should be snatched away from our land. Have we not established for them a secure sanctuary, to which are brought as tribute fruits of all kinds, a provision from ourselves? But most of them understand not. And how many populations we destroyed, which exulted in their life of ease and plenty. Now those habitations of theirs after them are deserted, all but a miserable few, and we are their heirs. Nor was thy Lord the one to destroy a population until Allah had sent to its center an apostle rehearsing to them our signs, nor are we going to destroy a population except when its members practice iniquity. The material things which ye are given are but the conveniences of this life, and the glitter thereof, but that which is with Allah is better and further enduring. Will ye not then be wise? Are these two alike, one to whom we have made a benevolent promise, and who is going to reach its fulfillment, and one to whom we have given the benevolent things of this life, but who on the day of judgment is to be amongst those brought up for punishment? That day Allah will call to them and say, where are my partners whom ye imagined to be such? Those against whom the charge will be proved will say, our Lord, these are the ones whom we led astray. We led them astray as we were astray ourselves. We free ourselves from them. In thy presence it was not us they worshipped. It will be said to them, call upon your partners for help. They will call upon them, but they will not listen to them, and they will see the penalty before them. How they will wish if only they had been opened to guidance. That day Allah will call to them and say, what was the answer ye gave to the apostles? Then the whole story that day will seem obscure to them, like light to the blind, and they will not be able to even question each other. That any that in this life had repented, believed, and worked righteousness will have hopes to be amongst those who achieve salvation. Thy Lord does create and choose as Allah pleases. No choice have they in the matter. Glory to Allah, and distant is Allah above the partners they ascribe to Allah. And thy Lord knows all that their hearts conceal, and all that they reveal. And Allah is Allah, there is none other deity but Allah. To Allah be praised at the first and at the last, for Allah is the command, and to Allah shall ye all be brought back. Say, see ye, if Allah were to make the night perpetual over you to the day of judgment, what deity is there other than Allah who can give you enlightenment? Will ye not then hearken? Say, see ye, if Allah were to make the day perpetual over you to the day of judgment, what deity is there other than Allah who can give you a night in which ye can rest? Will ye not then see? It is out of Allah's mercy that Allah has made for you night and day, that ye may rest therein, and that ye may seek of Allah's grace, and in order that ye may be grateful. The day that Allah will call on them, Allah will say, where are my partners whom ye imagined to be such? And from each people shall we draw a witness, and we shall say, produce your proof. Then shall they know that the truth is in Allah alone, and the lies which they invented will leave them in the lurch. Qarun was doubtless of the people of Moshe, but he acted insolently towards them. Such were the treasures we had bestowed on him, that their very keys would have been a burden to a body of strong men. Karun was doubtless of the people of Moshe, but he acted insolently towards them. Such were the treasures we had bestowed on him, that their very keys would have been a burden to a body of strong men. Behold, his people said to him, Exalt not, for Allah loveth not those who exalt in riches. But seek with the wealth which Allah has bestowed on thee the home of the hereafter, nor forget thy portion in this world. But do thou benevolence as Allah has been benevolent to thee, and seek not occasions for mischief in the land, for Allah loves not those who do mischief. He said, This has been given to me because of a certain knowledge which I have. Did he not know that Allah had destroyed before him whole generations, which were superior to him in strength and greater in the amount of riches they had collected? But the wicked are not called immediately to account for their sins. So he went forth amongst his people in the pride of his worldly glitter, said those whose aim in this life of this world So those whose aim is the life of this world, oh, that we had the like of what Karun has got, for he is truly a master of mighty benevolent fortune. But those who had been granted true knowledge said, Alas for you, the reward of Allah in the hereafter is best for those who believe and work righteousness. But this none shall attain save those who steadfastly persevere in benevolence. Then we caused the earth to swallow up him and his house, and he had not the least little party to help him against Allah, nor could he defend himself. And those who had envied his position the day before he began to say on the mañana, it is indeed Allah who enlarges the provision or restricts it to any of Allah's servants, Allah pleases. Had it not been that Allah was gracious to us, Allah could have caused the earth to swallow us up. Those who reject Allah will assuredly never prosper. That home of the hereafter we shall give to those who intend not high-handedness or mischief on earth, and the end is best for the righteous. If any does benevolence, the reward to him is better than his deed. But if any does evil, the doers of evil are only punished to the extent of their deeds. Verily, Allah who ordained the Quran for thee will bring thee back to the place of rest. Say, My Lord knows best who it is that brings true guidance and who is in manifest error. And thou hast not expected that the book would be sent to thee except as a mercy from thy Lord. Therefore lend not thou support in any way to those who reject Allah's message. And let nothing keep thee back from the signs of Allah after they have been revealed to thee, and invite men to thy Lord. And be not of the company of those who join deities with Allah, and call not besides Allah on another deity. There is none other deity except Allah. Everything that exists will perish except Allah's own face. To Allah belongs the command, and to Allah will ye all be brought back. Kitab Yaqdas, verse 96 a 114. O most mighty ocean, sprinkle upon the nations that with which thou hast been charged by God, who is the sovereign of eternity, and adorn the temples of all the dwellers of the earth with the vesture of God's laws, through which all hearts will rejoice and all eyes be brightened. Should anyone acquire 100 mikals of gold, 19 mikals thereof are God's, and to be rendered unto God, the fashioner of earth and heaven. Take heed, O people, lest ye deprive yourselves of so great a bounty. This we have commanded you, though we are well able to dispense with you and with all who are in the heavens and on earth. In it there are benefits and wisdoms beyond the ken of anyone but God, the omniscient, the all-informed. Say, by this means God hath desired to purify what ye possess, and to enable you to draw nigh unto such stations as none can comprehend, save those whom God hath willed. God in truth is the beneficent, the gracious, the bountiful. O people, deal not faithlessly with the right of God, nor, without God's leave, make free with its disposal. Thus hath God's commandment been established in the holy tablets and in this exalted book. He who dealeth faithlessly with God shall in justice meet with faithlessness himself. He, however, who acteth in accordance with God's bidding shall receive a blessing from the heaven of the bounty of his Lord, the gracious, the bestower, the generous, the ancient of days. God verily hath willed for you that which is yet beyond your knowledge, but which shall be known to you when, after this fleeting life, your souls soar heavenwards, and the trappings of your earthly joys are folded up. Thus admonished you God, in whose possession is the guarded tablet. Various petitions have come before our throne from the believers concerning laws from God, the Lord of the seen and the unseen, the Lord of all worlds. We have in consequence revealed this holy tablet and arrayed it with the mantle of God's law, that haply the people may keep the commandments of their Lord. Similar requests had been made of us over several previous years, but we had in our wisdom withheld our pen until in recent days letters arrived from a number of the friends, and we have therefore responded through the power of truth with that which shall quicken the hearts of men. Say, O leaders of religion, weigh not the book of God with such standards and sciences as are current amongst you, for the book itself is the unerring balance established amongst men. In this most perfect balance, whatsoever the peoples and kindreds of the earth possess must be weighed, whilst the measure of its weight should be tested according to its own standard, did ye but know it. The eye of my loving kindness weepeth sore over you, inasmuch as ye have failed to recognize the one upon whom ye have been calling in the daytime and in the night season, at even and at Mantan. Advance, O people, with snow-white faces and radiant hearts, unto the blessed and crimson spot, wherein the Sadratul Muntaha is calling. Verily there is none other deity beside me, the omnipotent protector, the self-subsisting. O ye leaders of religion, who is the man amongst you that can rival me in vision or insight? Where is he to be found that dareth to claim to be my equal in utterance or wisdom? No, by my Lord, the all-merciful. All on earth shall pass away, and this is the face of your Lord, the Almighty, the well-beloved. We have decreed, O people, that the highest and last end of all learning be the recognition of God, who is the object of all knowledge. And yet behold how ye have allowed your learning to shut you out, as by a veil, from God, who is the dayspring of this light, through whom every hidden thing hath been revealed. Could ye but discover the source whence the splendor of this utterance is diffused, ye would cast away the peoples of the world and all that they possessed, and would draw nigh unto this most blessed seat of glory. Say, this verily is the heaven in which the more book is treasured. Could ye but comprehend it? God it is who hath caused the rock to shout, and the burning bush to lift up its voice upon the mount rising above the holy land, and proclaim, the sovereignty is God's, the sovereign Lord of all, the all-powerful, the loving. We have not entered any school, nor read any of your dissertations. Incline your ears to the words of this unlettered one, wherewith he summeth you unto God, the ever-abiding. Better is this for you than all the treasures of the earth, could ye but comprehend it. Whoso interpreteth what hath been sent down from the heaven of revelation, and altereth its evident meaning, he verily is of them that have perverted the sublime word of God, and is of the lost ones in the lucid book. It hath been enjoined upon you to pare your nails, to bathe yourselves each week in water that covereth your bodies, and to clean yourselves in whatsoever ye have formerly employed. Take heed lest through negligence ye fail to observe that which hath been prescribed unto you by God, who is the incomparable, the gracious. Immerse yourselves in clean water. It is not permissible to bathe yourselves in water that hath already been utilized. See that ye approach not the public pools of Persian baths. Whoso maketh his way towards such baths will smell their fetid odor ere he entereth therein. Shun them, O people, and be not of those who ignominiously accept such vileness. In truth, they are as sinks of foulness and contamination, if ye be of them that apprehend. Avoid ye likewise the malodorous pools in the courtyards of Persian homes, and be of the pure and sanctified. Truly we desire to behold you as manifestations of paradise on earth, that there may be diffused from you such fragrance as shall rejoice the hearts of the favored of God. If the bather, instead of entering the water, wash himself by pouring it upon his body, it shall be better for him, and shall absolve him of the need for bodily immersion. The Lord verily hath willed as a body from God's presence to make life easier for you, that ye may be of those who are truly thankful. It is forbidden you to wed your father's wives. We shrink for very shame from treating of the subject of boys. Fear ye the merciful, O peoples of the world. Commit not that which is forbidden you in our holy tablet, and be not of those who rove distractedly in the wilderness of their desires. To none is it permitted to mutter sacred verses before the public's gaze as he walketh in the street or marketplace. Nay, rather, if he wish to magnify the Lord, it behooveth him to do so in such places as have been erected for this purpose, or in his own home. This is further in keeping with sincerity and holiness. Thus hath the soleil of our commandment shone forth above the horizon of our utterance. Blessed then be those who do our bidding. Unto everyone hath been enjoined the writing of a will. The testator should head this document with the adornment of the most great name. Bear witness therein unto the oneness of God in the dayspring of God's revelation, and make mention as he may wish of that which is praiseworthy, so that it may be a testimony for him in the sovereignties of revelation and creation, and as a treasure with his Lord, the supreme protector of the faithful. All feasts have attained their consummation in the two most great festivals, and in the other festivals that fall on the twin days, the first of the most great festivals being those days whereon the All-Merciful shed upon the whole of creation the effulgent glory of God's most excellent names and God's most excellent attributes, and the second being that day on which we raised up the one who announced unto mankind the glad tidings of this name, through which the dead have been resurrected, and all who are in the heavens and on earth have been gathered together. Thus hath it been decreed by God, who is the ordainer, the omniscient. Happy the one who entereth upon the first day of the month of Baha, the day which God hath consecrated to this great name. And blessed be he who evidenceth on this day the bounties that God hath bestowed upon him. He verily is of those who show forth thanks to God through actions betokening the Lord's munificence, which hath encompassed all the worlds. Say, this day verily is the crown of all the months, and the source thereof, the day in which the breath of life is wafted over all created things. Great is the blessedness of him who greeteth it with radiance and joy. We testify that he is in truth amongst those who are blissful. Say, the most great festival is indeed the King of festivals, the sovereign of festivals. Call ye to mind, O people, the bounty which God hath conferred upon you. Ye were sunk in slumber, and lo, God aroused you by the reviving breezes of God's revelation, and made known unto you God's manifest and undeviating path. Resort ye in times of sickness to competent physicians. We have not set aside the utilization of material means, rather we have confirmed it through this pen which God hath made to be the dawning place of God's shining and glorious cause. God had formerly laid upon each one of the believers the duty of offering before our throne priceless gifts from amongst his possessions. Now, in token of our gracious favor, we have absolved them of this obligation. God of a truth is the most generous, the all-bountiful. Alhamdulillah, Ar-Rahmani Ar-Rahim, Allahu Akbar. Dao ke dao, fei chong dao, ming ke ming, fei chong ming, Ja Rastafari. Deus nos te quies in cele santo facito nomen tuum, Vaheguru Sanam. Baruch ata Elohim, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kasanu b'mitzotav v'tzivan l'sok b'rvai Torah. Amen. Kyrie eleison, sevamastu savajikatehi, sabe sata bhavantu sukhitatam. Vagabiyam. Aquaba upendo na amani, fikiri na salami, cinta dan peramain, libov me, umanchika, ubuntu shabona fakitka. Session, kamosanida, domo arigato, pelama yellow walker toko doko shingun, gomenagat. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata jamia yat afanami. Medo, ho, shanti, shanti, shanti. Amen. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Full honor and respect to His Majesty Haile Selassie I. All thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim Jah. Blessed love and peace.